Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today I'd like to talk about three things. One is the game that we ran with several Marvel superheroes facing off against an obscure Marvel supervillain named Draco. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the fact that we ran this game session at a local comic book convention, and we're going to be doing more of that very soon. So if anybody lives within driving distance and is interested in playing, we're going to talk about how you can do that. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about some recent AI lawsuits that might be affecting the channel and how we're going to have to proceed moving forward, as well as some questions for you, the listener, about what you'd like to see. But before we get into all that, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. That helps us out with the YouTube algorithm, but also we love hearing from you guys. We have an awesome community here, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. So, all that said, let's dive in. So, first things first, and that is the adventure itself. My earliest idea for this adventure was for each of the players to select a knight from Marvel Comics and play them. Then I was going to have the villain be a dragon. So we could do the classic knights versus dragons thing. But when I showed my players the list of knights from Marvel, some of them couldn't find anybody they liked. So we changed that to a list of every Marvel superhero who has met King Arthur. Black Knight met King Arthur in Strange Tales issue number 108. Captain Britain and Dazzler met King Arthur in New Excalibur number 11. The Hulk met King Arthur in Indestructible Hulk number 13. Human Torch and the Thing met King Arthur in Kang the Conqueror issue number 4. Kitty Pryde and Jean Grey met King Arthur in Excalibur XX Crossing issue number 1. And my favorite was Iron Man and Doctor Doom met King Arthur in Iron Man issue number 150. In that one, both Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom end up in Camelot as a sort of riff on a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. And in it, we are told that King Arthur was Stark's childhood role model. And it's either in that issue or there was a what if issue where Tony never made it home. But in one of those, we're told that when Tony Stark helped to found the Avengers, he actually had the Round Table in mind, and that him wanting to be a knight when he was a little kid is one of the reasons why Tony would eventually come to wear armor, which supports my theory that the Knights of the Round Table were the first supers. Anyways, so once we knew what heroes we were going to use, I had at first thought about having the dragon in the adventure be Fang Foom, but I didn't like how his stats looked compared to the stats of the heroes. So then I considered using a Fantastic Four villain named Dragon Man. But while researching him, I stumbled upon my favorite Marvel dragon, which is Draco, aka Demosthenes Q Drake. To the best of my knowledge, old Drakey baby, as our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man likes to call him, never appeared in the comic books, but rather his first appearance was from Power Records. I keep seeing records and record players for sale at Walmart, so I'm really hoping that the younger guys who listen to the podcast already know what records are. If not, that's okay. I know it's before a lot of people's time. Let me know. And once I recover from the shock of realizing just how old I am, I will be happy to explain what a record player is in the comments section. But suffice it to say, they normally played music. But in this case, the case of Power Records, they told a story about superheroes. And the album sleeve that the record came in doubled as a giant comic book. So kids could hear the story and follow along. I actually remember learning how to read that way. And if I remember correctly, the old Invasion of the Dragon Men record was my introduction to Spider-Man. Anyways, so as a result of all of that, I am deeply nostalgic for Draco. And as soon as I remembered that he was an option, I for sure knew he was the one I wanted to use then as the villain. The next thing that I should probably explain about this game session is that we ended up running it at a small comic book convention at our local mall. There's a game store there that started off by selling video games and Pokemon cards, but they've been growing and are beginning to branch out into other things too, like Dungeons and Dragons books. So this past summer, the guy who owns the store held their first convention in the mall. And our mall, by the way, is arguably a dead mall. It hasn't officially closed its doors yet, but it isn't the glory days of yesteryear when everyone would go to the mall on the weekend. Most of the time, when I go to the mall for something, I'm the only one there. It's still clean, it's well lit, but you're usually the only one that's walking around listening to 80s music softly playing on the speakers. So it's kind of like walking around inside of the ghost of my childhood. 90% of the stores are gone. So the mall is pretty desperate now for any excuse they can get to get people there. So the guys who run this game store throwing a convention was pretty cool, partially because it got warm bodies through the door, but also because ever since my own comic book store closed its doors 20 years ago, there hasn't been a place to hang out. Plus, everybody my age got married, had kids, and were busy with family stuff. So now suddenly, after all these years, and our kids are graduating and moving out, stuff like that, we all ran into each other at this event at the mall. And a bunch of guys came over to my table where I was selling D&D books and my wife was selling dice bags. And one guy, Matt Ridgway, came up and gave me a hug, and he said how much he missed hanging out at the store that I owned, back in the day. And he asked if I ever thought about opening one up again. But I explained that, the way the economy is these days, and I'm not in terrific health myself, I just didn't think I could swing it. But now, thanks to these conventions that are starting to happen, I could be at the mall more often, and we could hang out that way. And so, as one might expect, a bunch of the old gang that were all hanging around the table wanted to play the game. So, this is the adventure that we ran. As such, there wasn't too much of a story. It was really just a beat 'em up. We used hero clicks for the miniatures for the heroes. We used Mage Knight figurines for the villains. And of course, in the end, the good guys knocked out the bad guys. The guys at the mall, the players, I mean, had no idea what had been going on in my game world. So I felt like I should just keep it simple. I told them that the Shaper of Worlds had deleted sewer pipes and the sewers had flooded. And that's what Draco and his dragon men had used as a headquarters. So they were mad about all that flooding. And they came up to the streets of New York City to kill all humans. And that was it, game wise. Just the good guys knocked out the bad guys, and that was the end of it. When we were done, the guys who played it had a great time and wanted to play more. So I spoke to the guys who run the game store, and they're going to host another one of these tiny comic book conventions on November 1st that's going to double as a Halloween party. So at that convention, they're going to convert an old unit where they used to play laser tag into a game room for me to use that day. Some guys who do 3D printing are going to try to print up an entire city for us to use on the table. And we're going to be running more games kind of like this one then. So if any of the folks out there listening to this podcast, if you live within driving distance of Mansfield, Ohio, and are interested in playing the game, drop me a line or check out the website for Ready Up Game Store in Mansfield, Ohio. I've also been talking to the guys in the mall about a family game night that would be more often than these miniature comic book conventions are. So I might also be running the game there if everything goes well. All right, so now that we've talked about all of that, there was something else that I wanted to mention. I've said earlier on the podcast that my day job was that I was an art teacher for the Mansfield Art Center. I taught kids how to make their own comic books. I taught traditional cell animation, figure study, landscape painting, etc. But when AI generated art hit, the kids who had wanted to make their own thing quit signing up for the classes. They'd rather just have the computer do it for them. And I get it. The computer images are way easier, they typically look better, etc. But still, I was out of a job. So one might assume that then I would be anti AI. But I was reminded of something that I learned in art school. We had to take classes on art history, and we learned about the invention of the camera. At the time when cameras first hit, especially in Paris, portrait painters were furious because the camera was putting them out of a job. The painters railed against this new technology, and they did their best to try to make sure that the camera would just go away. But all their energy was wasted. And of course, in this day and age, most people have a camera in their pocket, right? In the form of a cell phone. So I thought that whether AI was good or bad, it probably wasn't going anywhere, right? 100 years from now, AI will probably be super commonplace. So based on that, I decided to not fight it. And as most people are already aware, I decided to use it for the art on my channel. Before that, by the way, I would hand draw all the channel art. I could do the pencils in about a day. It would take me about another day to ink it, and then another day to color it in with professional artists' markers that I've owned since the 90s, which, by the way, when one would dry up, I would replace them from time to time. And now I can't do that because the local art supply store has also been driven out of business by AI. But I digress. So, point being, I used to make the channel art the hard way, and I'm going to be just super honest, it just didn't look as good. It took way longer than I preferred. And worst of all, a far smaller number of people actually liked my channel back then. By the way, to those who have been here the entire time, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone who watches my videos, but I wanted to show particular gratitude to the ones who had been here from the beginning and had put up with that uglier, earlier version of the channel. Anyways, so this week, the companies that make the AI image generators got sued. Disney sued Midjourney for violating copyrights that they had on their characters, which included Marvel characters. And likewise, Warner Brothers sued too, which affected the AI's ability to make pictures of DC characters. So, as I was trying to make channel art on Friday, For the first time, I got a new message telling me that the AI image generator that I use the most, which is Bing, was no longer allowed to do what I had been doing. And to be clear, whether we are talking about the likeness of a specific actor or the design of a fictional character, the intention that I always had with the channel art was just to portray the game world the way I always imagined it would look. And if I used somebody like Christopher Reeve, it was never meant as a slight. Rather, I grew up on the Christopher Reeve movies, and any channel art of him was meant as an homage, compliment. The same can be said for me using a character like Spider-Man. I grew up with him, and I have a great fondness for the character. That's why he's in my game. But moving forward, I'm not sure how this is going to work. I don't know if I can keep using AI art, or will I have to use the art I've already made, just recycle it? Or will I have to switch over to actual art from DC and Marvel Comics? I'll say this, we have an Earth H channel as a separate channel. And as a little experiment, I did try it that way, where I was using art from the comics, and not many people at all watch those videos. So I am a bit worried that if we quit using AI art, people will just quit watching my channel. So that's where you guys come in. At the beginning, I said I wanted to hear from you, and that I'm curious to know if we did switch over to comic book art that has appeared in actual DC or Marvel publications, would you still follow the channel or not so much? Let me know in the comments section. And of course, while you're there, we would love it if you would hit like and make sure you're subscribed. And from all of us here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next video.